Greetings and salutations. Welcome everyone to Live from NCCE. And since it's our first broadcast since it started, Happy New Year to everyone. Hope your school years are going great. We're excited to start off with an amazing guest, my friend Leon Tynes. Leon teaches grades 3 to 8. He's a technology teacher at the Academy of Math and Science in Phoenix, Arizona. But his list of accomplishments is absolutely amazing. He's a Henry Ford Teacher Innovator. He's a I can never say it right, Grosvenor Teacher Fellow through National Geographic. He's been an ISTE Award winner in multiple years, but of course he was the Outstanding Teacher of the Year in 2018. And he's a Fulbright teacher. And he's also this year, correct me, a Computer Science Teachers of America Fellow. So
Yes,
Leon knows what he's talking about. We're thrilled to have him here to talk about computer science in diverse communities. Thank you for coming, Leon. Please take it away.
Anytime. It's, first of all, just shout out to all the teachers that are teaching during this time and aren't quitting and are persisting. It's so easy for us to leave right now. But, a lot of us are still here, even with all the uncertainty about teaching online or teaching, in person, in an unsafe environment. But real teachers persist, and this is what we do. So just hats off to all the teachers out there that are continuing to work with all of this very interesting stuff going on right now, but it's very tough. But remember, it's also tough for our kids too, to try to navigate all of these spaces. It's very difficult without the stimulation of real people instead of just looking at a screen. So we just got to be a bit empathetic with that as well. And I think, segueing with empathy, this is a big topic, huge topic within computer science that it doesn't seem like anyone really understands. And let me just give you a little bit of background as far as how I got into teaching computer science. First of all, I was a techie from day one. My mother she is a teacher by nature. She taught for 40 years. She's retired now and doing some homeschooling for my nieces. And, but she's in her 80s, still teaching, but she was passionate about making sure that I had the appropriate technologies at home to do my work. And I learned about computing. So that visionary mindset kind of stayed with me, and I had some friends that worked at Sun Microsystems, taught me Java and early JavaScript, so it became a kind of like a hobby for me, I guess. And then after that, went to business school, law school, was working in those realms for a long time, and then I figured out that I was the only one in these spaces. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do to get more candidates of color that are able to, practice law, conduct some type of business, get their master's in business or engage at that level. And I said, hey, teaching is the best way to prepare students. So I decided to pursue my passion, and it was teaching. And I've been doing it for 11 years now. But computer science is just something that I always kind of dabbled in, even basic and plus. I've always been in it. I was never allowed in the labs because, that's where the nerds were. Even I was in a diverse school, but it was labeled as the white male nerds. So everyone else was kind of excluded, even though I had one of those computers out. So how do we change that narrative here in 2020? Because it's very important to start getting rid of that concept regarding computing and moving forward into what it's going to look like in 2030, 2040. So I wrote a paper not too long ago as an ambassador for CS for All Teachers. And of course, it was around the time of the BLM issues of the summer. So I really dived into how we facilitate computer science within these communities where we have a whole bunch of marginalized students that aren't even getting a seat at the table when it comes to deciding on engaging in computer science within their courses. So let's chat about that a little bit. And I like to start off. Oh, well, there's my little animation. But I like to start off with a couple of like general understandings, because we need to know. Well, education is always driven by the marketplace, so we need to know why we are where we are and where we're bound to go in the future regarding computer science education. Number one, our country is diverse. It's been diverse for a long time. It's getting more and more diverse. Okay. The tech industry is restrictive by design. People of color were never part of the conversation at the beginning of the tech industry. If we look back to the 80s, this huge boom in the 70s and 60s, we know from our movies that have just come out about NASA that it was restrictive by design. They did not allow people of color, women hard to even be involved in those. We know this by nature. It's not we're just going to get rid of right away. Our digital divide, and this is a COVID thing, we found out that we have not cured the digital divide. How do we expect students to compute? It's almost impossible. Okay. So if they cannot connect to the internet or connect beyond the speed of a smartphone, they definitely can't do any high level computing or even mid level computing. Okay. Another one, a curriculum cannot make you an inclusive educator. So we are now dealing with this cross section of inclusiveness and the difficulty of getting administrators and everyone to generally understand what computer science is in a K through 12 context and why it's necessary. Another point, our system of education is not designed to promote diversity and inclusion in STEM subjects. STEM subjects are nothing new, including computer science. STEM subjects are not new. They often exclude women. They often exclude people of color. They often exclude students with disabilities. This has been going on for at least 30 years, even before desegregation that happened in schools. So that's something that we have to fight, and it's a big 400-pound gorilla. And the other thing is that while our schools are becoming very diverse, the education industry is becoming less diverse. And what I mean by that is that we have less and less teachers of color going into our spaces. And that's always going to be a barrier when it comes to, especially at the high school level, where kids get to choose what courses they're going to take. They don't see anyone like them, specifically in the STEM subjects. So that's going to be a barrier, because if I don't see anyone like me when I'm young, I may or may not, depending on where I am in my childhood development, I may not be comfortable with a different teacher, or maybe that person is like your gateway teacher to that entire industry. So we're dealing with a lot of issues regarding diversity in CS. All right. So our status quo right now, we know that a lot of at the beginning, a lot of curriculum providers drove this push into computer science education. And we know why that was, because the Googles, the Facebooks, Instagram is still Facebook, and Twitters, they know that the industry is not diverse, but they want to funnel a whole bunch of money so that they can, in another 10 or 20 years, they can have a diverse workforce by funding this initial CS push and this push in K-12 education. Tech companies are lacking diversity. They're having problems with government contracts and other types of contracts that require that their campus or their workforce be at least 20% diverse, with underrepresented and marginalized populations. They just aren't doing it. Part of it is their hiring practices, yes, but part of it is that literally there's just not enough for the size of these companies. Okay. So these are my type of suggestions to teachers to really get kids organically interested in CS and to broaden what we do with CS, because the traditional way that a lot of people have taught CS is they stay strictly in, oh, here's an algorithm, here's a more complex algorithm, here's an even more complex algorithm. And you run it within, a computer and you get some type of output, but you get the output from the computer. I don't want to see text scrolling, that doesn't work for what's going on in our students. They're competing against Instagram, Twitter, what's the other one? TikTok is a big thing now. It just doesn't compute. So what happens is that in a lot of our classes, we get those kids that are naturally or somehow scientifically attracted to CS, and we have to broaden beyond that, because CS is a part of our everyday lives. Whether you're talking about shoe design, it involves CS. Where you talk about even food distribution, there's a lot of CS and a lot of algorithms and AI involved with that situation. So we don't have a choice but to get more students involved and more diverse students involved in CS. So number one, provide context. Teach through authentic learning. Let's not just say, oh, here's the code, here's the syntax, because, between those two activities or those two concepts, you've lost a whole bunch of kids. Okay. Project and problem-based learning, things that are real, where I can say, great, let's ideate and come up with an idea that we can solve through technology. And then we will teach you the code that pertains to that project. Wow. While you solve a problem in your own community. Okay. And it could be anywhere from redesigning a stop sign to identifying, let me see another one I did, identifying cultural art pieces on a map, on a GPS based developing type of app. So go and see something regarding Mexican American heritage, see art pertaining to that publicly, where I can go. A good example, one of my later examples, this particular project with my advanced placement computer science students. And yes, it was a diverse group. And instead of just them to pass, which 86% of them did, to also do project. And so instead of just staying in the explore tasks, and they did use this for the create tasks and the multiple choice exam, I made them actually build something and synthesize a whole bunch of skills into one large project. And this encompassed the entire class, and they were broken up into different groups, but everyone was involved with the coding. So what this did was, there's neonatal abstinence syndrome, where if a child is born and that can give up, and so they those sensors within the incubator will mimic the heart rate, the vibration rate, the temperature, the voices through a low pass filter, so they heard their mother's voice on a loop, those types of things. So they redesigned that incubator to include those things, and it won several awards. But getting them to actually do something with their learning instead of just teaching the code. Physical computing is another big issue. Get out of the box. And when I say the box, I mean that computer. But this helps demystify computer science for students that are like, I'm not so sure. And especially students of color, because when they see, wow, we're actually doing a project and I can make a connection in the real world to this, whether you're using block code or Python or JavaScript, it makes a much stronger connection than just working in the box. And it sparks natural curiosity. They can build things. They learn a little bit about electrical engineering, and it just works together and allows the input and the output that is beyond something that's textual or that something that appears on the screen. And through that, you can empower students. And I love this picture because it shows the teacher engaging with the student in a physical project. Provide that individualized support. So when you start doing projects, you have no choice but to provide individualized support. So if someone says, hey, my code's not working, it's going to be something that pertains to that project, not necessarily to the entire class. Of course, there's some times where there's syntax errors. You can unpack that with the entire class, but you also can validate and strengthen ideas. This is a big thing. This is what our students of color, this is what diverse students need. They need to know that their thinking is valid and that it's important and that their voice is heard. By just coding in a box or teaching syntax does not give you that. It doesn't give it in a meaningful way that students are going to attach to. I do this a lot. And I can use Tammy as an example. So if I come up with an idea for my class, or I want to, a curricular idea or a project, or I just want some feedback regarding, I want to make sure that I'm getting to every student in an equitable way. I'll either record, I can record my lesson or have somebody walk in that I trust, or I could send some ideas and things to like Tammy and some other people in my network and say, am I doing this correctly? Even I do it wrong. Even I will bypass a student of color. And sometimes it's not intentional. I have 30 to 35 kids in a room, but I want to make sure that my processes are reflective and that I'm getting better all the time, or that I'm providing the requisite support to different types of groups, different, I have kids coming in my class from different classes. So it's a different composition every hour. So I want to make sure that I'm being responsive to their needs, and I'm making sure I'm identifying students that are struggling, and I support students that come from diverse backgrounds. Now, in my classroom I'm teaching, I have a 98% of my students are Hispanic. So it's totally flipped. Okay. But I just want to make sure as a practice that I do it anyway. I do have some African students. I have some white students. I have some students that are not Hispanic, but come from like Colombia, Puerto Rico, and things like that. And I do have to address them a little bit differently and make sure that their needs are met. So I love bouncing my ideas from people that you trust, not just random people coming in your classroom, but people that you understand that are doing their best to make sure that their classes also in turn are using equitable practices. Here's another one. It's TrailBlaze. And I know there's so many teachers right now that are being stifled, that are being unheard. And I get it. It's depressing, and it's so easy to crawl into your own hole. I think Tammy and I were talking about this right before the session. Mm-hmm. And you have to get out there and do what's best for the students. And sometimes that can be hard. Sometimes that can be challenging with administration, but that's our responsibility. That's our professional responsibility. So when I say TrailBlaze, find alternative funding. When they say, no, we can't get you a class set of tablets to do MIT App Inventor, or we're not going to buy you, we're going to get you i3s instead of i7s so that you can do, some real high-end programming. Find alternative funding. I didn't even ask in my new school. I didn't ask. I just started, I got in my position. I started writing grants.
Hey, Leon, there's a question if you've got a moment.
Yes,
for new teachers. Yeah, great. For new teachers specifically. And it's wonderful to try to find alternative funding, but what's the best way to create a meaningful CS project for students. It's like, if you're not super familiar with it, are there resources out there that teachers can reach to? I mean, I was thinking of PLN, but you may have some other resources.
PLN has some great ones. Raspberry Pi has a forum and has a lot of examples of projects, which are absolutely tremendous. So that's another good one. MicroBit has grown exponentially. And that's a really good platform because the device is $17. So you don't need
or
much
you can
more.
use it digitally on the website.
You can use it digitally until, you could literally go like almost like, half the year before even actually using the MicroBits. But I had a whole class decide that they wanted to, and they fundraised for for a class at a MicroBits. That's exclusively theirs. I won't use it with other students because they fundraise for those.
Right. I do know that through my PLN, a friend of mine reached out who teaches high school up in Washington, and her students had written a grant so they could train younger students in MicroBits. So my students were the beneficiaries of this grant. So every student got a MicroBit, and we used CS. We used a Teams chat, Skype meeting, right, for them to port in, and their students were teaching my students. So it's really exciting because we're in Manteca, California, where it's a very diverse community, and she's also in a diverse community. So my kids are talking to high schoolers who are totally into CS that look like them. So it's super powerful.
You must be talking about Melissa. We were writing a MicroBit grant at the same time. So I got one here for Arizona, and they gave me $8,000 to buy pretty much the whole campus a MicroBit. So we are one-to-one MicroBits.
Excellent. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So
it can be done, but you just have to think about it, and then find a network of teachers that are doing similar things. Like, I'm always on Twitter, and people always hit me up all the time about what could I do. But that's a really good question. What can you do? You can do what your students tell you that they want to do. So if you say solve a problem with technology, they will frame it out. They will tell you what they want to do. Now, obviously, you're not going to build this huge robot that's going to cure, cancer and do all these things. But do something simple, whether it's just something like, local garbage. Maybe they can create something with a crane handle. You can do those with Legos and things like that. But just have them ideate on a small scale to solve something really, really small. I know one of my groups they redesigned the stop sign so that it would use LEDs like in the letters and in the frame, so that people could see it even brighter than just a reflective piece. Because if you're slightly off axis, you can't really see that stop sign at night. So and it was motion detector and stuff like that. But that was a very low cost project with just some LED strips. And I think we did use a MicroBit for that. But there are so many sensors for all of these devices, very low cost. Third-party challenges like Samsung Solve for Tomorrow. Verizon's coming out with a brand new one. They used to have an app challenge. They're coming up with another one. The Congressional App Challenge, things like that will give you a nice framework to get kids started to do these types of things. And whenever your children do something at your school, show it off. All of it, not just, oh, this is the best. Show it off, even if it's incomplete. Show it off, have them put a narrative to it, have them do a poster next to it, and have them describe what it is intended to do, even if they're still in the building phase or the testing phase. Show it off. Definitely. That builds confidence. And when other students see that, wow, hey, Miss Dunbar's doing these amazing things, and she's totally celebrating her children's learning, I want to be in that class. And now organically you start getting students of color, women, girls, just people with students with disabilities, because that support is there and they get to outwardly see it. So those are some really quick and dirty tricks that I use to really facilitate a classroom. But I'm going to go back to one word though, and I think Tammy, you will second that: validate, validate, validate. You want a creative environment in a CS environment. You do not just want syntax, algorithms, abstraction. It just can't be that by itself. That's kind of not the world that we live in, and if are just so myopic with that approach, you're going to lose kids. You're going to lose interest, and you're going to get
I agree 100% with you. Teachers
Mhm.
were worried when educational technology came out that technology would replace the teacher, and
Right.
really, it absolutely can't. We have to be there to support all of our learners, and
Right.
when we see that genius, that spark in any student, we've got to fan that flame and let them know you've got this. You can do it. Let's push you a little more, right?
I think my students like the fact that whatever they come up with, we will do. So, Mr. Tynes, I have this idea to do this, and that. I may bring it down in scale, but we're going to do it. If I'm going to be like, well, this piece costs $1,000 and we're not doing that. A lot of the things I do with my middle school students, they come up with an idea. I was like, great, go to Amazon and give me a shopping list.
Yep.
You know why? Well, first of all, they think they're going to get it. And I always figure out a way to get it. But number two, they have to organize their thoughts and say, oh, okay, I have a microbit. What other pieces do I need to make this work? So it's a trick. It's like, hey, yeah, now go research that. Go to Amazon, give me a list. And that usually takes them a little while because they have to do that requisite research to find out what I need to do. But in the process, they find out about the code. They find out how to construct each individual piece.
Mm-hmm.
And they come to me with like this elaborate plan. And I say, okay, great. We're going to spend the next 2 weeks doing that. And they just love it. I mean, and that's what I mean by validate. You have to validate their learning and don't ever just say, oh, you can't do that. You say, why don't we do it this way? Or why don't we work on this piece? Because that's that here's the crux of what you want to do, but we want to miniaturize it so that we can prototype it. Oh, there we go. We start talking about CS language again, prototyping, testing. If we make this big thing, it's hard. It's hard to prototype and test. Hey, maybe Tesla, would like to buy it, and license it later on, and we can start doing those things. But they have to understand that these ideas actually, even in industry, they start with miniatures. They start small, and then, they go a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger before they get to that massive prototype.
Yeah,
So,
no. And, when you get them to put that list together too from Amazon, I did this one year when they wanted Lego robotics and I had them put the list together. I used Donors Choose. I just used their list and put it in and we got it. There are so many matching grants in Donors Choose for CS.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you've been on there, and that's a super site too. And
I
how
love
empowered do they feel when they get a grant?
The kids can't believe it when I just, like right now, I'm sitting on a debit card with like $2,500 on it, and it's from one of my grants. And they're like, what do you mean you can just order it? I'm like, I have it. I could just order it and that's it. And they're like, what? I was like, why do you think I keep telling you about grants? That we're working really hard to make sure. And see, Tammy, I haven't even asked my district for anything. Zero. I just went and got it. And they're just like, wow, you just didn't ask. I was like, no, didn't ask. I just went and got what I needed. I just got 14 Samsung tablets donated to my classroom, just like that, because someone saw a news piece that I was in, and they're like, we would like to donate. And then there's an employee at Microsoft. I got to email him back. He saw the same piece, and he wants to organize something through Microsoft now. And I'm just like, once the ball starts rolling and that mindset works with you, first of all, it's contagious. It will be contagious to the kids. And everything will open. All these doors will open for you, but you just have to get that ball rolling. You have to get that thought process and those ideas. And so the school that I left, and I just moved from Connecticut here. And the person that I mentored, you know, she's getting down in the dumps because of COVID and everything else like that. And I said, you still have to keep moving with your kids. You still have to do the things that we did. And she just won the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow. She's now a semifinalist. That's automatically $15,000 for a classroom of Samsung stuff. So it's just trying to keep that momentum and making sure you're in a network that's going to support your thinking.
Yeah, and to wrap up, Leon, I'm pretty sure that you are on Twitter. I don't have your Twitter handle on the top of my head. Would you like to share your Twitter handle and last advice?
At Leon Tynes Jr.
JR, right? Not JUN.
AR. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Nice. Oh, I just love the idea. Well, I mean, I love doing it too, but I just love how eloquent you are at telling us what we need to do for our students. People, you know, teachers need to hear that, and we need to have this network of teachers. And now everybody who's here has you in their network. I mean, I already did. I'm very lucky. But
ask me any questions.
I'm sorry?
I said, I tell everyone, ask me any question. It's really about creating a community, and it's really about also making sure that you reach each student and meet their needs individual. We're now in individualized education. So that's the best approach.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today on our first 2021 live from NCCE. We're continuing next week with Jeff Bradbury. I don't have the graphic, but Jeff will be presenting on Share and SharePoint alike. So if you are into SharePoint, come next week at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Again, our sincerest and humblest thanks to Mr. Leon Tynes. I'm looking forward to see what you accomplish this year in the Computer Science Teachers Association Fellow. And thank you for your time, and everyone, thank you for yours. Have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll see you in a week right here live from NCCE.